I'm going to talk to you about comparison today. And before you start saying, what is he going to talk about comparison for? I'm going to show you what gets in the way of your peace of mind and success. And it's through comparison. I want you to see this word here because I want to give you two key sentences that if you forget everything I've given you here today, I want you to walk home with this. And if you're taking notes, write these two sentences down. All comparison is a trap. It'll cause you to get stuck. I'm going to give you another sentence here. This is the second one to write down. All unhappiness is caused, get ready, you might argue with me, but when you think about it, did you get it? All comparison is a trap. You're going to get stuck. All unhappiness is caused by comparison. This is so important. All unhappiness is caused by comparison. We only feel unhappy when we compare what we have now to something else. Perhaps when we were younger or healthier, or when we were with a certain person, or worked at a certain company or organization, or we had a certain recognition or certain honors in a certain class or school. But that's where we get stuck and get caught. And that's where we start to become unhappiness. When we start to become unhappy, where there is no comparison, unhappiness is impossible. I should write that one down too. This is the third sentence you should write down. Where there's no comparison, unhappiness is impossible. Happiness exists in the mind and is not removed from itself when it remains in the present time, in the now, and when it declines to contrast itself to other times and conditions. I'm going to say that again. Happiness is when the mind stays in the now, stays in the present moment, and declines or eliminates contrasting itself to another time or another condition. I'm pausing because I want to make sure you hear that. So if you can understand this, this is critical. Now, let's go back to when we were children, or if you're raising children, what you should not do. And it may be real obvious. Remember, children are fragile. A low or a negative self-esteem can be further developed into more negative or even lower through the common habit of belittling or comparing or comparison. That is, if you belittle a child, it's obvious, you're going to create self-esteem problems, especially parents. Or comparing the child to another sibling, brother or sister, or to someone outside the family. It has a devastating effect. And what happens is that when we start, or when parents compare, oh, you're not as smart as Billy, or you didn't get the same grades, or you can do what Billy's doing, the child starts to pick up this doubting idea that the parents aren't sure that he is whole or complete or perfect. Okay, so this is another critical area, and maybe you were brought up in this kind of a home environment. It wouldn't be unusual for anybody over the age of 40, perhaps, to have this have happened where you were compared to somebody else. Not as smart, not as humorous, not as good looking. He's better, he's got this, or she's got that. It's not unusual. But I'll give you some ways to get around this. Okay. There's another aspect that takes place at work. When we compare ourselves to others, or when we start to compare, when you pick up the signal that you're starting to compare, recognize that it's a sign of poor self-esteem. The person who compares himself to others lives in a state of perpetual fear. I'm going to say this again. The person who compares himself to others lives in a state of perpetual fear. He fears the people that are above him are much more superior and are rising away, and therefore he's trying to catch up, and he wants to look good in their eyes. Do you know anybody with this kind of a problem? We all do it to a certain degree, but I'm going to give you some antidotes. Then what happens is this person in the state of perpetual fear that somebody's getting away starts looking at somebody who's inferior or who just started at the company, who's younger, doesn't have the skills yet, starts to fear subliminally or unconsciously that this person's starting to catch up. And that when they catch up, they'll pass him or her too. Now, this is obviously not good health-wise. So what happens is, if you work for a company or organization, you're always looking around to see who is the threat. Where's the looming threat coming from? Sort of like I'm doing this finger thing. It's like a radar. And you're looking constantly. Is this a threat? Is this person catching up? Is this person gaining? How can I look good in their eyes? And you get on this perpetual treadmill. Okay. This also, as you start to grow in the organization, as you rise up in the organization, you have this other fear, and this fear of falling or failing and then falling. So that the only way to go through life is to beat people at their own game. You describing anybody I know? Does this make sense? What happens is you start to rise up. You start to see people as competition. You start to see, can I beat them at their own game? And your primary concern becomes being one up on the next person on this imaginary ladder. And what happens is life loses its enjoyment. You forget what you were put on this earth to be and do and become. Okay. Competition is a way of trying to prove yourself, to bolster that poor self-image. The only person that you can compete with, now we're getting to the antidotes. Number one, the only person you can compete with is yourself. And here, competition is not necessary. Our goal should be to strive for excellence, to become the best version of ourselves that we can be. Okay? And who determines that? Well, you do. You know it if you're working on yourself, if you're working on your inside, not the outside, the inside, your skills, your self-mastery, your discipline, becoming really well-versed in your particular line of work. If you try to compare yourself to someone you feel is above you, you're always going to feel less than. If you compare yourself to someone below you, you're going to feel a false sense of superiority, and you're going to live in fear that those people below you are starting to catch up. I want to leave you with these last words. Don't be concerned with what others do. Be only concerned with what you do. I'll say that again. Don't be concerned with what others do. This is really hard. Only be concerned with what you do. When somebody comes to your office, you're going to have to believe what Joe said or what Joe did. Can't believe he did that in a meeting. Shut it off. Only be concerned with what you do. This doesn't mean don't observe somebody's performance, because you can learn from other people's performance, but don't compare yourself to them. You've got to be careful. This is really a nuance. It's subtle. This is not comparison. When you see somebody doing something really great, wow, that person gave a great speech. You want to pick up what that person did in that speech and borrow their ideas or borrow some of their techniques or their skills. This is how you take in more information so that it can benefit you and help you grow from the inside out rather than comparing yourself to others. I'm Joe Murphy, and I hope this changes your idea about comparison. It's such an important video. It'll bring you peace of mind and change your entire life if you get this concept. I'm Joe Murphy, and I'm here for your success. Thank you for watching.